get into what's going on around the Big Ten. And there's a lot of news coming out of the other side of the conference, the magnificent Big Ten East, which is just so full of power and so mighty. Just I was thinking about it today. It feels like over the last 5 years, all the big programs over there, besides Michigan, really have just been riddled with scandal after scandal, from Penn State and their molesting of children over decades, and Michigan State and what they've been going through with the domestic and sexual abuse by some of the players. And then just in the last few weeks, we learned that Urban Meyer, possibly at least top two coaches in football, in college football, um, is covering up this and lying about this scandal where one of his assistant coaches was beating his wife, and he hired him after he already knew about that, and then he lied about it. I mean, and then yesterday we get this press conference, suspended for 3 games. I want to hear, I don't know how read into the situation you are. I'm pretty ready, and I just want to hear your overall thoughts on the punishment we got for Urban Meyer.
I mean, I'm not surprised by the degree of punishment that was dealt out, because it's a Ohio State investigation, and Ohio State punished him the way that they wanted, obviously, and that was 3 games. And of those 3 games, only one team actually poses a legitimate threat, and that's TCU. Even so, as good as TCU is consistently, they're not Ohio State, and I think Ohio State.
There's a caveat too. He's not suspended from practice.
Yeah, that's another thing. He's
like
the first game, but September 2nd, he's reinstated with the team.
Yeah, so I think it's for show more than anything, honestly. And I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You can argue all day long whether or not, it's worthy of him being fired. I definitely think if he wasn't so successful, he would have been fired instantly for that. If Mike Riley at Nebraska last year, say we had kept him on this year, and then over the offseason we found out all this stuff, they would have fired him in 2 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. And this whole situation, I actually did write an article for this for the site, but then the story kept changing. And my thing is you cannot tell him, if you go back further, you cannot tell me that this guy didn't know. And then he tries to give this bogus explanation that if he would have known more, he didn't know enough. I'm like, you paid for the dude's counseling when you were coaching in Florida,
yeah,
and then you brought him with you to Ohio State. I think you can pretty much tell the judgment of this guy's character.
And I don't know how much you read into the report by the investigators, it wasn't internally Ohio State, but it was a council put together by Ohio State, the Board of Regents, and some other people. But anyways, in the report, it says, I mean, it's just so bogus. When they were talking about him lying at Big Ten Media Days about having any knowledge of it, which he clearly lied, and in other instances where they found him lying, they said that he conveniently had taken medicine that was known to cause memory loss. So he literally he didn't remember because he took his medicine that day. So he had very convenient amnesia. Are you kidding me? That's the most BS thing that you could possibly put in a report like that. And if you watch him at Big Ten Media Days, he's not drugged up on medicine. He knows exactly what he's saying. He's lying to the people. If he would have just come out in the first place and said, "Hey, I made a mistake. I should have been better about my personnel. I need to set an example for the young men that I'm coaching. We're going to remove Zach Smith for the things that he's done." And if he would have just apologized, come clean, I think that they could have gotten away with not even suspending him. I think everybody would have forgotten about it in a couple days. But the fact that he lied about it over and over again and all this stuff came out, man.
I'm sorry, you can't. And this
is disappointing. And I'm an Ohio State fan, secondary to Nebraska too, and I can't defend it. I'm very disappointed with Ohio State now.
You cannot use the Roseanne Barr excuse in this situation where I was under the influence of medication. So I don't know what happened. Like, you can't use that excuse. I'm sorry. That doesn't work. And honestly, like I said before, I'm not surprised by what Ohio State did, because it's something where it's like, okay, we have to do. You're right. If he would have got ahead of this, they probably would have got away with doing nothing. But and I agree with you here, where, well, we got to do something, so let's do the first 3 games, and
Yeah.
then where you play Oregon State, who is a mop, if anything, you play Rutgers, who's a laughing stock and always will be, and TCU. The only legitimate thing is TCU, and they're 3rd or 4th place in the Big 12 at best.
Ohio State's going to spank them. No, they're going to win all the games, especially the fact that he'll be at practice. This is basically like nothing. It's just, I don't know. It's really disappointing, and like,
And
I think that people would have understood if he would have come out and just said the truth, that he had worked with this guy, that him and his wife had tried helping them, and maybe it didn't work out well, but that they believed that maybe they could help, but that looking back, this was a mistake. We don't condone this kind of behavior, and we certainly don't want to teach the young impressionable student athletes that he's supposed to be a leader of. If he'd have just said that, problem solved like that, but no. So I'm disappointed. There's that, and then there's what's going on, or what happened at Maryland. Unfortunately, young man died on the football field, or when slipped into a coma on the football field and died a few days later from being overworked during conditioning, and a lot going on with that. Still, we're waiting to hear the fate of DJ Durkin, the head coach, to see if his job there is done. I have a feeling that they're just going to have to, because it's one thing if the kid just has heat stroke and gets sick and maybe is injured for a little bit, but there's human life lost here, which is just so much bigger than anything has to do with football.
Could have been easily avoided. And yeah. I'm sorry, but I don't think that exists necessarily as much as it used to. But yes, there's that old Bear Bryant thing where nobody gets any water until this happens, or this, that kind of thing. But in this time, and the technology that these colleges have at these facilities, and how they could treat these student athletes, there's absolutely no excuse for that. And
the crazy thing is, when it happened, there were the trainers were there. There were medical staff there for the university, and I could be a little off on the time, but I think it took around an hour for the ambulance to show up, or for them to call an ambulance to come take him to the hospital. I mean, yeah, they definitely completely botched helping this kid out. And I know Durkin wasn't actually at the practice, but there's a lot of accusation that he promoted that kind of culture. And I will say, just to play the devil's advocate a little bit, having played football for 12 years as a kid, that there are always the kids on the team that are a little softer, shall we say, and don't do well in conditioning, and complain and fall over when they're totally fine, and that's just them, crying wolf. So there's a little bit of that, but at the same time, like, they had every opportunity to diagnose the situation and help this kid, and it's just a tragedy that this happened.
Right. Yeah, and if there's a history of this too, I mean, then this comes out that there's a history of them being abusive and being, and there's just no place for that. And I
think they got to fire him and just move on, even if Durkin himself really didn't have anything to do with it, just to cleanse the situation, like what Penn State did. Like, maybe not every coach and person in that organization. Speaking of another huge scandal, like I said, they just said, we got to get rid of everybody. We got to restart. Like, this culture just needs to change. Like what happened with Baylor a couple of years ago.
And yeah, and I totally agree. And I think that I totally understand what you're saying, where there's just there's just players that are going to be soft. But encouraging them and toughening them up isn't the same as killing them.
Yeah, no. Completely unacceptable.
It should not in a Power 5 school. That should never happen.
I agree.